Welcome to the video for Chapter 7 of the Cambridge Introduction to Sanskrit, Vowel Gradation and why we need to know about it. Vowel gradation is a phenomenon that we find throughout Sanskrit verbs and Sanskrit nouns. Understanding it helps us understand the links between and the system behind large numbers of Sanskrit forms, and that in turn makes remembering and recognizing those forms much easier. So in a nutshell, the purpose of this chapter is to effect more understanding and therefore less memorization. So let's see what this vowel gradation looks like. For example, in Sanskrit, the idea of carrying is expressed in a number of related word forms, such as the verbal root bhr, the corresponding present tense stem para, so for example in parasi, you carry, bharati, he, she, it carries, and so on, or also in nouns such as bhara, which means a burden or a load, i.e. something that is carried. So what we have here is in the verbal root the vocalic r, bhr, but in the present tense stem, we have an R that is preceded by a short vowel A, and in bhara, we have this R being preceded by the long vowel A. And this pattern of simple vowel, r, vowel preceded by A, R, vowel preceded by long A, giving you R, is something that we find throughout Sanskrit and throughout all of the simple vowels. So all of the relevant information can be summed up in this table, which consists of the left-hand column, which is just the simple vowels in their short or in their long form. Then in the middle column, these simple vowels preceded by the vowel a, and in the right-hand column, these vowels preceded by the vowel long a. Now, this adding of short a and long a affects all sorts of little changes. So for example, the vocalic r and vocalic l, if preceded by a vowel a or any other vowel, actually become their semi-vowel equivalents, so turn into the consonantal r, the consonantal l, to give us r, al, and r, al. The lines for ii and uu, which give us I, e, av, o, I, av, au, respectively, as you can see, are a little complicated, so we'll look at these in just 1 second to understand what's going on there. And finally, in the bottom line of this table, we have nothing, a, which is basically the system of what's going on in the lines above. So we have just the basic vowel with 0 a being added, which is also why this is called the 0 grade of these vowels. Then in the middle we have short a added, and this is called either the full grade, or the Sanskrit term for that would be guna. Or in the right hand column what we have is long a being added to those vowels, and this is then called the lengthened grade, or in the Sanskrit terminology the vrti of this vowel. So let's look at what's happening in the lines for ii and uu. Now remember, in chapter 2 we were introduced to the complex vowels e, I, o, au, and we're told that originally these would have been I, au, au. The little asterisks in front of I, au, au tell us that we don't ever see these vowels appearing in this form in Sanskrit, but we know that they at one point must have existed in this form. And this system of vowel gradation is actually one of the places where we can see that originally ei, o, au would have been I, au, au. So how do we see that? Well, let's look at the bottom of the screen to remind us of the 0 grade guna and vrti forms of ii and uu. Now ii is 0 grade, there's 0 a added. The guna form of ii is either I or e, and the vrti forms are either I or I. So how does that come to be? Well, the 0 grade is ii, there is 0 a in front of it. In the guna, we have an a added in front of it, and so a plus e we would expect to give us I. Now, as we know, I changes into e, but that actually only happens before a consonant. If we have I in front of a vowel, then a slightly different change happens, namely the I changes into its semi-vowel counterpart, namely y, and so I changes into ay, and the a in that simply remains as it is. So I, which is the guna of ii, appears either as e before a consonant or as ay before another vowel. In the case of vritti, we have a added, long a added in front of the zero grade vowel, and that gives us I. But as we know, I changes into I. But that again actually only happens before another consonant. What happens before another vowel is that the I changes into its semi-vowel equivalent y, and the a in front of that remains unchanged, so in front of a vowel, I appears as ay. And that's why the vritti of ii has two alternative forms, namely ay in front of a vowel or I in front of a consonant. In the case of u or u, we have the exact same situation, except that in guna, where we add a in front of this simple vowel u or u, the guna results in au. Before a consonant, the au changes into o, and in front of a vowel, the u again changes into its semi-vowel equivalent, but that semi-vowel equivalent is w. So that's why we have guna appearing either as ab or as o. And the same thing in parallel happens in vritti. We have a long a added in front of the u, giving us au, which appears as au in front of a consonant, or as aw before another vowel. So this is how we arrive at these two lines, ii, ie, I, and uu, av, o, and av, au. Vowel gradation, so what we've just been introduced to, is at the basis of a number of systems throughout Sanskrit. And if you understand vowel gradation, you understand what is going on in those various systems, and that in turn means not having to memorize all the different forms in those systems. So look at the earlier part of this video again if vowel gradation isn't quite clear yet, and no one can blame you if it isn't, because it isn't quite straightforward, unfortunately. So if you need to look at the earlier part of this video again, or if you feel reasonably comfortable, then do go on watching. What we will be looking at from now on is these various systems in which vowel gradation plays a role. First of all, among those systems are the verb classes that we've already looked at, class 1, class 4, and class 6. When we looked at them in chapter 3, basically we had this mysterious, an a is added in front of the zero grade vowel and an a is added behind it. Now we can see that this is part of a larger system, and we can, if we understand the concepts of guna and vritti, we can use those to here state the rules for how to form class 1, class 4, class 6 present tense stems much more easily. So in order to form a class 1 present stem, we need to take the root, put it into guna, and add an a after it. So br, to carry, has the zero grade vowel r. We put that into guna, which gives us r, and we add an a to it, and so the present tense stem of this class 1 verb is bhara. In class 4 present tense stems, on the other hand, the root remains in zero grade and a ya is added after it. So a root such as hirsch, to rejoice, remains in zero grade, and we have ya added after it to give us hirschya. And then finally, in class 6 present stems, the root stands and remains in zero grade, and an a is added after it. So wish, to enter, then gives us the present tense stem wisha. Understanding about vowel gradation also lets us introduce class 10 verbs, because class 10 present stems actually have a lot more formal variation than the present tense stems that we've encountered so far. And this variation can be explained by the fact that, or can be explained as, the roots standing in zero grade, guna, or vritti in a class 10 present stem, And then to this root in zero grade guna or vritti, aya is added. So for example, of chint, to worry, we have a present stem, chintaya, and a third singular, chintayati, he, she, or it worries. Of kat, to tell, we have a present tense stem, kataya, and a third singular, katayati, he, she, or it tells. Of chur, to steal, we have a present tense stem, choraya, and a third singular, chorayati, he, she, or it steals. And of kshal, to wash, we have kshalaya, with a third person singular, kshalayati, he, she, or it washes. Now, what you need to know is that in a class 10 present stem, you don't know what grade the root is going to stand in. You need to be able to recognize it no matter which grade it stands in. However, if you want to form your own Sanskrit words and you want to know the system behind this, basically, some class 10 verbs have as their source not really a verbal root, but actually a noun. So this supposed verbal root chint is actually based on a noun chinta, meaning worry, and the supposed root kat is actually based on a noun kata, meaning a story. And in the actual verb, the grade that the root in quotation marks stands in is just the exact same grade that the noun also stands in. So chinta, chintaya, kata, kataya. Then there also are a number of verbal roots in class 10 that are not based on nouns. And in those roots, what happens is that they are strengthened so much that in the stem, the root syllable, the first syllable, is long or is heavy. So if you have a root such as chur, u counts as a short vowel. You can get a long vowel, namely o, by putting this root into guna. Remember, e, I, o, au, all count as long. And so by putting chur, u, into guna, which gives us o, we then have choraya, and that would be a long or heavy syllable. If, on the other hand, you have a root with the vowel a, which is guna, a is not a long vowel, does not make for a heavy syllable. What you need to do there is you need to go one vowel grade higher. You need to go to vritti, to go from kshal to kshal, and once you've done that, then you have a heavy syllable, and that is then what's used as the vowel grade in the present stem of kshal to give us kshalaya, and therefore the verb form, the third singular verb form, kshalayati, he washes. Understanding about vowel gradation also allows us to understand about causatives. Now, a causative is a form based on a normal, regular verb form that means to cause someone to do something. So, for example, our root wish, to enter, which gives us the regular third-person singular form wishati, meaning he enters, actually has a causative weshayati, he causes someone to enter. A root br, to carry, has a causative bharayati, he makes someone carry, he causes someone to carry. The root drish, to see, which has a normal present tense form pashyati, has a causative darshayati, which means he makes someone see something, therefore he shows someone something. What's happening here is that we take these roots, we put them in whatever vowel grade is enough to make these first syllables long. So from wish, 0 grade, we just need wesh, guna, to have a long syllable. From per, we need to go not to guna, bhar, but to vritti bhar, to have a long first syllable in bharayati. And in drsh, we go to darsh, so again just into guna to create a heavy syllable to give us darshayati. And then after we have strengthened the root syllables enough that they give us a long or heavy syllable, we then again add aya, and then we add our normal endings. So I'd have weshayami, weshayasi, weshayati, and so on. These forms based on verbs that are not class 10, but that strengthen their roots and add aya are so-called causatives, and they mean to cause someone to do whatever the main verb is about. So to cause someone to enter, cause someone to carry, cause someone to see. Among causatives, we have one formal irregularity, and that is if you have a verbal root that ends in a long R, such as sta, to stand, then A already is long, cannot be strengthened any further. And if I were to add aya to that, that would just give me staya or something like that. That's not really recognizable as a causative, and it's perhaps because of that that we then find a slightly different formation of the causative, namely, whenever the root ends in long A, a p is added behind it, and after that we then find the aya added. So sta gives you stapaya, and for example, a third person singular stapayati, meaning he causes someone to stand or he positions someone. Something else that we can now understand is how verbal roots that end in a vowel form their present tense stem. If you remember, class 1 verbs form their present tense stem by taking the root, putting it into guna, and adding an a after it. And you may also remember that the guna of the zero grade vowels ii or uu can have two different forms depending on whether this guna is followed by a vowel or by a consonant. And we have this schematic here again at the bottom of this screen. So ii has a guna I if it's followed by a vowel, and a guna e if it's followed by a consonant. Zero grade u or u has guna ab in front of a vowel and o in front of a consonant. So if I have a root that contains ii or uu, and that ii or uu is followed by a consonant, then this root, if it's class 1 and we need to put it into guna to form the present tense stem, will have its guna appear as e or o. So for example, if you have a class 1 verb such as shuch, which means to mourn, then you take shuch, you put it into guna, turning it into shoch. The guna of u is o if a consonant follows, and here the consonant ch follows. So from shuch we get choch, and then we add our vowel a, and we add our ending. So for example, we get shochati, he, she, or it mourns. If, on the other hand, we have a root that ends in ii or uu, then the guna will appear in its pre-vocalic form, because after the root in a class 1 verb, we always add the vowel a. So, for example, from ni, which is class 1, to lead, we take the guna, which could either be ni or nai. And here we have to use nai, the pre-vocalic form, because what follows is a vowel, namely the vowel a. And so we have the stem naya, and then we add our ending to it, giving us nayami, nayasi, nayati, and so on. So from ni to lead, we get nayati, he leads. Same principle, drew, also class 1, meaning to run. In order to form the present tense stem of this, we need to take the root and put it into guna, and then we need to add a. The guna of drew would either be draw in front of a consonant or drub in front of a vowel. Here we have it in front of a vowel, namely in front of a, and so the stem is draba, and to that we then add our endings. So for example, we get drabati, he, she, or it runs. Same applies to long zero grade vowels. So bhu, to be or to become, also is class 1. And in order to form its present tense stem, we again need to take the root, put it into guna. Guna of bhu could either be bo or bhab, depending on whether a consonant or a vowel follows. What follows again is a vowel, namely this short a. And so we don't have bhoa, but bhawa as the present tense stem. And to that we then add our endings. So for example, third singular, bhavati, he is or he becomes. Another thing we can now understand, now that we know about vowel gradation, is the citation of verbs. Normally, dictionaries, vocabulary lists, and so on would cite verbs in their most minimal form, which is the verbal root in zero grade. So, for example, we have bhr, smr, hirsch, wid, muj, lub, lik, and so on, all of which are verbal roots that you have already encountered, and all of which are verbal roots that stand in zero grade. You can tell by the fact that they contain a zero grade vowel. In these cases we have vocalic short I, and short U. If you know about vowel gradation, you can then infer all other forms of these verbal roots. So you can infer the guna and you can infer the vritti. And thus you can infer, for example, what the present tense stem of one of these verbs would look like. Yet, from now on, we will also see verbs that are cited by referring to the verbal root in guna. There are several things to note here. A, we need to be able to recognize this fact in order to know how to form, for example, their present tense stem. So, for example, if I know about vowel gradation, I can see that a verb such as yaj, which means to offer or sacrifice, is cited with the root already in guna. I can tell because it contains an a, and a zero grade contains zero a, so this obviously is not the zero grade of the root. And if I can see that yaj already is cited in guna, I can understand why its present tense form is yajati, where I have, once again, the verbal root in guna, yaj, and I add a, and I add my personal endings, mi, si, ti, and so on. So on the basis of yaj, I get yajati, he, she, or it offers or sacrifices. You might now ask, why do we complicate things by not just citing all verbal roots in their most minimal form, that is, their zero grade? And the answer to this very good question is that yes, normally verbs are cited by reference to the verbal root in zero grade, but some verbs are cited by the verbal root in guna if it is not possible to infer guna and vritti on the basis of their zero grade. There are several reasons for why that might not be the case, and we're going to go through these one by one now. So, for example, there are some verbs that add guna a and vritti a, not before, but after their zero grade vowel. Remember, all the verbs that we looked at so far formed their guna by adding a in front of their zero grade vowel. So, for example, on the basis of shuch, which is a class 1 verb meaning to mourn, we get the guna of the root shuch by adding an a in front of the u, and a plus u in front of another consonant gives us o, and so on the basis of shuch we have shorch. To that we then add our a and our verbal ending, and so, for example, we get a form such as shorchati, he, she, or it mourns. However, look at the verbs given directly below. We have wach, swap, yaj, and raksh. You can tell that all of these verbal roots stand in guna because they all have an a in them. Wach, swap, yaj, and raksh. Now look over to where their zero grades are given. They are uch, sup, ij, and ruksh. How do we arrive at these zero grades? Well, if you look at wach and uch, what is happening here is that the zero grade form uch has the guna vowel a added, not in front of the zero grade vowel u, but behind it. And whenever an u stands in front of another vowel, it appears not as u, but as its semi-vowel counterpart, w. And so instead of u, ach, we get wach. Same with sup. The guna is formed by adding the guna vowel a after the zero grade vowel u, and so we get not su up, but swap. Same thing happens in the case of ij. Here we have an I, zero grade vowel I, that is then followed by the guna vowel a, and this I, when it stands in front of another vowel, turns into y, and so we get from ij the guna yaj. And if you have a zero grade root such as ruksh with a vocalic r, what happens is if that vocalic r is followed by another vowel, such as here the guna vowel a, it appears not as a vocalic r but as a regular consonantal r, and so from the zero grade ruksh we get the guna form raksh. If we listed these verbs by their zero grade roots, uch, sup, ij, and ruksh, we would not have any way of predicting their guna forms. We would not know that these are irregular roots that add the guna vowel not in front of, but behind the zero grade vowel. If, on the other hand, we quote these roots by reference to, we quote these verbs by reference to their roots in guna, so by referring to them as wach, swap, yaj, and raksh, we can, on the basis of these guna forms, infer what the zero grade is, and we do that simply by taking away the a. And we can also easily infer what their vrti forms would be, because for that we would simply take the a, the short a, and replace it by a long a. So if we list these verbs in their guna roots, and we can recognize that these roots are in guna because they contain an a, we can infer both the zero grade and the vrti forms. If we were to list them by reference to their zero grade forms, we would not be able to tell that these verbs are slightly irregular, and therefore we would not be able to infer their guna and their vrti forms. The exact same logic applies to roots that end in a nasal, so that end in a sound such as m or n. They also are always cited in guna rather than in zero grade. And so, for example, we get gam, to go, man, to think, and so on. And again, we can see that they are cited in guna because they contain the guna vowel a. Again, this happens because on the basis of their zero grade, you would not actually be able to infer their guna or their vrti. Why? Well, the zero grade of gam and man would be gum and m respectively. So in order to get to the zero grade, you just remove the a. From gam you get gum, from man you get n. And remember, the rule to get from the zero grade to the guna of a root is that you add a in front of the zero grade vowel. But in the case of gum and min, there is no vowel, and therefore you cannot know where you should add guna a. So for example, on the basis of gum, you can't know whether guna would be agum, or would be gam, or would be gma. So with the a added at the beginning, or in the middle, or at the end of the root. Again, if you cite these roots in guna, you avoid that problem. If you have the root in guna, you can easily tell what its vrti would be. So on the basis of gam and man, we get gam and man. And you could also easily tell what their zero grade would be, namely on the basis of gum and man, we would get gum and min. However, having said that, there is one complication that we need to be aware of, and that is that the zero grade of gam is gum, but only before a vowel. In front of a consonant, this zero grade appears as ga. Same with man. The zero grade is min before a vowel, but actually appears as ma before a consonant. The new rule that we are encountering here is that nasals between consonants turn into short a. So for example, if you have gm and a consonant follows, then this m stands between two consonants, namely between g and whatever follows. And whenever that is the case, whenever a nasal stands between two consonants, it appears as a. Right now, this rule sounds very abstract. So what you need to do right now is just remember it for future reference, because as soon as next chapter, it is going to be applied repeatedly, and then it will make more sense. So again, in a nutshell, if the zero grade of a verbal root does not allow you to infer the forms of guna or vrti, then that verbal root will be cited in guna, not in zero grade. Therefore, if a root is listed in a form that contains a, you can know that it stands in full grade, and you can know that a needs to be removed in order to get to the zero grade form. Also, if a root is listed containing any other vowel, so ii, uu, or l, you can know that a and a need to be added in front of that vowel to form the guna and the vrti of that root, respectively. That was it for this chapter. We hope that you found this video helpful, and if you have any comments or suggestions, we would love to hear from you. Please do write to us at ruppel@cambridge-sanskrit.org. And now, for your own work on this material, good luck and have fun!